How are you, Brownie?
I'm well, Bonze. I'm well. Just locked down here, sitting on
Lockdown
my
life,
boat.
Brownie. Lockdown life.
Lockdown life, mate. Lockdown life. Everyone's in the same boat. It's frustrating, but it is what it is, man.
Yeah. So, but I'm guessing you've been getting a fair bit of footage edited, mate.
Yeah. That is the one silver lining for me is that I've got a whole bunch of footage that has been sitting in the can, wanting to be edited. So, yeah, I've definitely been taking the opportunity to catch up on a bunch of work and pump out a bit of content and keep everyone entertained. So yeah, no, it's been good. So if there's been one positive out of it at all, it's that I've been catching up on some good editing.
Yeah, it certainly looks like you've got a couple of epic shows coming up, mate.
Yeah. The one I'm really excited about is our last trip up to the Wanganellas. That footage is definitely some of the stuff I'm most proud of, and it was one of the most exciting trips I've been on. So yeah, I'm going to pump that one out on Sunday. So yeah, hopefully everyone is into it, and it kind of makes up in some small part for everyone missing the tail end of the game fishing season. But yeah, hopefully everyone enjoys it.
Yeah. It's been pretty brutal. So fingers crossed we're out of this, and there's still a couple around at the end of it, and then hopefully we can get into some bluefin. So
Yeah, that's it, mate. That's it. Yeah, fingers crossed.
yeah, mate. Now, there's a couple of things there, eh? Before you started fishing, mate, like I know you've been into fishing all your life, but you've got a pretty interesting story that I'm sure a lot of people actually don't know. Before you're into your fishing, you're a professional athlete, mate. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So for 18 years, I was travelling the world as a professional whitewater kayaker. I was mainly involved in exploration stuff. We'd go off and film documentaries in far-flung corners of the earth and fly off big waterfalls and explore new rivers. And yeah, for 18 years I was sponsored by Red Bull. I was Red Bull's first athlete in New Zealand. And yeah, I only finished up with them a couple of years ago. The old body started to pack it in. A couple of years ago I broke my back in a few places and had a shoulder reconstruction, and so it was starting to get a bit creaky. And yeah, that's sort of that's my background. That's what I've been doing for over half my life. So yeah, it was an interesting way to make a living, but I saw a lot of the world, paddled in over 70 countries and had some epic adventures along the way. So yeah, wouldn't change it.
Yeah, well, you're starting to have some pretty epic adventures now, mate. Tell us a little bit about what you're actually, what you're doing now.
Yeah, that is true. And someone asked me the other day to compare kayaking to fishing, and I said to them that when I think back of those kayaking years, the things I miss is like hanging out with my mates, doing great adventures, working towards a common goal, seeing spectacular places, and all that stuff translates into fishing pretty well. So for me, it's I'm getting all the things that I miss from the professional kayaking days out of fishing, so that's a bonus. But the transition for me into filmmaking and making fishing content it was all sort of born out of the kayaking as well. I used to work on the Zambezi River as a video kayaker. I'd make videos of the rafting trips as they went down the Zambezi. And then once I got sponsored and started to travel around kayaking, even though we had the budget there to make productions, just because of the nature of the locations we were going to, there just wasn't any possible way to have camera crews follow us down. So we took those skills we'd learnt video kayaking and started turning our hand to documentary filmmaking, and the boys got pretty handy at it. And for me, I was always real keen on fishing. I used to fish all the way growing up, and I just took a camera out fishing a few times and just made a few little clips and having a bit of fun to show off to the boys. And yeah, that's sort of where Built to Fish was born, really. And yeah, it's just growing all the time, and yeah, I'm really stoked with the way it's going.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've known you from day dot of Built to Fish. I mean, I met you at the Tauranga Boat Show one year, and I knew you from being a Red Bull athlete. And I used to follow you on Instagram, and I saw that you did a bit of marlin fish. That's why I approached you and said, "Hey, Brownie, you're into a bit of marlin fishing," and become mates ever since then. And but the cool thing is that I got a chance to meet you and give you a hand to try to catch a marlin. It's been reasonably successful for you, mate, since you sort of got right into it. But, tell us a little bit about actually how you got into the marlin fishing.
Well, my old man lives out in Carfia, so he's been out there for about 11 years. So I was doing a bunch of fishing out there. And on occasion, I'd see the old boys bring in a marlin to the gantry and weigh it. And it used to just blow me away thinking that, there was marlin swimming out off the Waikato west coast. I always imagined them as being more tropical sort of species. So I thought I'd have a crack. So I talked to the old boys down at the fishing club in Carfia, and they gave me all the hot tips. They said, get a blimmin' Lumo sprocket, hang it off the back of your boat, go out to the 65 metre line, drive half a day south, turn around, drive half a day north, come home. And if you're lucky, every year or two you might get a bite or catch one. So I went out in my little 6 metre boat, had a crack, grabbed a couple of lures off the shelf and out of a store in Hamilton, dragged them off the side of the boat, no outriggers, no harness, no nothing, and we had a bite in the first 10 minutes of getting the lures wet. Actually stayed on for a little bit. It fell off, all very exciting. Boys were pretty excited. And then we went for another hour, hooked another fish, same thing again, jumping around. That stayed on for about 20 minutes. I was hanging on to it with no gimbal. It started jumping, going crazy, so I cranked the drag all the way up to Sunset to stop it. And it fell off. And then, I sort of started to try and learn a bit about marlin fishing. And it was it's a bloody hard thing to find information about. It certainly was, 8 or 9 years ago. And but I picked up a few bits and pieces off the web and various other places and grabbed a pair of cheap outriggers. Got a new boat, got a 7.3 metre Surtees, and we went out and spent a week at the start of February dragging lures, and just me and a mate of mine, Navy boy. And we had so many bites on the second day. First day we had a bite, fish jumped around, must have jumped on the line, or I probably had about 15 kilos of drag on it, snapped the bloody main line. Next day we had a bite, hooked the fish in the tail, wound it up stone dead. Had our first marlin. The boys floated around for an hour, congratulating each other about being these epic fishermen. And ever since then, man, I've been hooked. But after meeting you at the Tauranga Boat Show all those years ago, that certainly changed my life for marlin fishing. Since we had caught that first fish, I'd probably done 2 more seasons, was getting plenty of bites. So obviously the boat was raising them, but was just having zero success at getting them to stick. So took on your advice, took a leap of faith, and totally changed the system over to the whole light gauge system. And I had nothing to lose.
It was very quite daunting too, because it was right in the infancy of all of that starting. I'd only just started it myself, so you to come in there and just go, here, man, I just need it. I need to change everything, and it's quite when you set it all up, and you mentioned you got that new boat and then you change all the setup, and it's quite daunting when it's all set up until you actually use it, Yeah,
100%. I was, I set all the gear up, all the riggers and that in the driveway out at Carfia, and couldn't understand how we were going to get it to work. But, I had faith. I gave it a shot. We went for a little shakedown trip. It was the 5th of January. And I just wanted to go for a run and, see how the gear ran. You never know what's going to happen. And first day running that light gauge system, we got a double on, or what we thought was a double. It was actually the same fish. It came in and ate both our corners and came up with all 4 hooks in it. And on the first day ever using the light gauge system, we caught the earliest marlin capture for the Carfia Boating and Angling Club in their history. So it was a pretty spectacular start to using the light gauge system. It was the first marlin I'd ever caught with a hook in its mouth rather than foul hooked in the tail. And that season was just a revelation for me. I think we caught 10 fish, dropped plenty of others. It was a really sharp learning curve, but man, I certainly haven't looked back, and it was really a game changer for us.
Yeah. So now that you've had a bit of success, obviously that builds some confidence, and you've got better at it. This year, you've had a pretty phenomenal season, mate. Tell us about this year, like your fishing this year, what you've done, what you've changed, the results you've had, and why you think that's happened from the start to what it is now. You know, the results that you're getting.
Yeah. Yeah, well, over the last year to 18 months, I've had the opportunity to fish with a whole raft of different skippers. Did a couple of trips with you, one to North Carolina to fish with Captain Bobby Schlegel on the Islander, and then to Kona to fish with Brownie on the High Flyer, and did a couple other trips, some trips up to the Wanganellas, and just talking to these experienced skippers, seeing the way they do things, it's planted a few seeds in my head. And I spent a lot of time, I spent pretty much the whole winter thinking about how I was going to pop more fish up behind the boat. So the one big change, well, I did two things this year. I got bigger outriggers, which gave me a little bit more space in them. So I'm running all my lures out of the riggers. And I've also started running my submission teaser daisy chain out of my starboard rigger. And the reason I did that is because fishing in Kona with Brownie, I was watching the way he was running his riggers, and I was seeing where those blues were popping up on the teasers and how effective it was. And in previous seasons, I'd been running my daisy chain off the corner of my transom, and then I was running my long corner out of the rigger, and there was this big gap between the teaser and the rigger, and it made sense what Brownie was doing. He had the lure and the teaser in line, and that was something that I wanted to try. So I connected that to a little Daiwa Tanacom electric reel, run it back up through a pulley off my outrigger, and man, that's the single biggest thing after changing the light gauge that I've done that's improved how many fish are popping up behind my boat. I can, off the top of my head, I can think of at least 4 that came up and grabbed that teaser. So that was one of the big changes I made, which had pretty immediate success. So I also have been really, really particular on always running sharp hooks this year. I check at the end of every day, I'll check the sharpness, and if those hooks aren't tacky on my thumb, at the end of the day, I'll replace them, even if I've only been running them for a day. And that's had a massive improvement to my hookup ratio. We've had 17 bites this year and caught 17 hookups this year and landed 15 of them. So that's another one of the changes I made. I've also started on all my lures, no matter how big they are, I'm running all my hook rigs one up, one down, 160 mils apart. So I'm getting those hooks closer together. And that way, that's given, in my mind, it's given the fish a better chance of getting both the hooks in its mouth, So, yeah, it's those are the big changes I've made. So, yeah, we've had a pretty epic season. I've done 21 days, and like I say, we've landed 15 fish. We did fished 5 days during the Nationals, caught a fish.
And that's all out of Kafia?
It's all out of Kafia, yeah. So, normally I'd be travelling around a bit more, but this year I just really wanted to put a lot of energy into fishing in the home turf. So yeah, that's 15 fish out of Kafia. So pretty stoked with how the season's been going. Obviously this little 4-week lockdown's put a bit of a spanner in the works, but it's all good. Stoked we got a few fish before we got shut down.
Yeah, definitely. I was just going to say, I bet you're doing it real hard after that kind of fishing to be in lockdown. But yeah. But saying that you've got the boat all tuned in and raising some fish. Tell us a little bit about heavy metal.
Oh, heavy metal. So this is actually the 3rd reincarnation of heavy metal. The first one was my original boat, which was a 610 Surtees Spar Crusher, and that was a real neat boat. I used to have great fun. Not really well set up for marlin fishing. Having said that, I could have easily set it up. And then the next Surtees I had was a 7.3 meter game fisher, which is effectively the old model of the current version of heavy metal that I'm sitting in now, which is a Surtees 750 game fisher. I built this one from the ground up. It's a it's built off their spec designs. There's no like major alterations or modifications I've done to it. I did a couple of things. I filled the transom in, took out the walk-through transom. I did that so that I could back down on the fish a little better. I just didn't want any water washing through the walk-through transom. I put an extra little bit of thickening on the top of the gunnels, and then ran 4 rod holders down each side, just so I had an extra rod holder to run a teaser reel and a dredge boom out of. And this year I've actually put in the Exploding Fish rotating rod holders, which are super epic. They can rotate full 360, and you can set the angle of your rods, which is yeah, I mean, I'm not sure it makes a huge difference to how many fish you catch, but it just makes your spread sit nicely when it's going up into the riggers. I chucked a little tuna tower on the roof that we use a lot, and the only other thing I really did was I just added an extra 8 mil of extra 8 mil alloy plate on each side of the cabin, just to mount the Kraken outrigger bases on. So yeah, it's been a really good boat. It's had a lot of success. I think we've caught it's over 60 marlin in it. We sort of lost count this season. We had a few big days but yeah, we caught our 50th this year, and then caught our 60th this year. So now the numbers have been good.
Yeah, and what do you got power in that bad boy?
I got a Honda BF 250 4-stroke outboard, and yeah, it's the second one I've had on here, for no other reason than that Honda rotates them out every 500 hours as part of an agreement I've got with them. But yeah, it's a good motor. It's definitely, in my mind, well, I think it's undeniable that its fuel economy is industry leading for an outboard motor of that size, and it seems to raise the shit out of the fish. That the first day I ran the motor I've gone on at the moment, we had a bite in the first, 20 minutes. And then, yeah, the third day we had a 3-fish day. So, yeah, really happy with the Honda, actually. It's a good motor.
Yeah, no, it seems to be, mate. You guys are on fire. But so if you were just starting out and you had some advice for anyone starting out, I should say, and they want to catch some marlin, they've got a boat, what would you be saying to them?
Well, I mean, I'd be telling them what you told me, because that's what worked for me, and that's to change over to that, that light gauge system. I mean, even that, not even so much the light gauge system, but the techniques that you taught me to use when you're fishing for those, with those light gauge hooks and rigs, and that's, running both your riggers and both your corners out of your outriggers. That was revolutionary for me. I'd never ever had a short or long corner bite until I ran my corners out of the riggers. I'd say run the light gauge hooks, but I'd also tell them to, don't be scared about running them on light drags. And then the other piece of advice I'd say to them is to use your boat to chase the fish. You take your boat to the fish rather than trying to pull the fish to your boat. That one thing that I've learned over the years, fishing with the light gauge, is that what works really well for me is as soon as I can getting in behind the fish, and that's something that you taught me as well. So that way you've got the hooks in the fish's mouth, you've got the lure back behind it, you've got the drag of the line behind it, and everything wants to stay in place, rather than if you get in front of it and you're pulling it off its bill, you're just going to pop it straight off its snooter. So, in terms of equipment, that's and techniques, that, I'd just be regurgitating the stuff that you taught me. But I mean, it's been just, like I say, revolutionary for my fishing. In terms of trying to find the fish, sorry mate, I cut you off there.
No, I was going to say, what you mentioned is a handful of simple things too. It's not like it's you're having to learn some really difficult things. It's a little bit of boat setup, a bit of gear, and then some technique, and they're not difficult things to do, And as I say, everybody makes this way too complicated.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, they're hard, those fish are hard enough to find as it is, without overcomplicating the way you try and catch them. But yeah, I mean, it's just time on the water, you know, and it's easy to tell people the techniques you use in that. But you're right, you don't have to overcomplicate it. And you know, the beauty of those light gauge hooks is you get a bite, you run for a few seconds, let that fish get away from the gear, keep an eye on it, you can stop the boat, you know, there's none of this rubbish you see you guys running on for hundreds of meters trying to set hooks, pop up drags, strike and all that stuff. We stop. I mean, obviously it depends what the fish is doing, but you know, as soon as I can clear the gear on my starboard side, I'll turn and start chasing that fish. You know, this year I was chasing a fish down with all my teasers out, my dredge out, my whole port side lures out, and we didn't even have a chance to get all them in before we had the fish on the leader, you know. So
that's so cool for me to hear that, because
thinking about
oh, are we there? Hello?
Yeah, we're there. Yep, carry on, mate.
I was just going to say, it's so cool for me to hear you talking like that, because, I mean, from my side of things, to hear what you say, all I've done is give you information. I've never shown you or anything like that. You've worked out this all yourself, mate. So, like, what you talk about is exactly how to do it. And, like, I can always talk about it, but you're actually out there doing it. And that's what I was trying to say to guys. You need to just get out there and try.
Yeah, 100%. And that, you know, if you're having success with what you're doing, then stick to what you're doing. But if you're not happy with how many fish you're hooking, or how many fish you're raising, or you know what your conversion rate is from bites to landed fish, then you know what do you got to lose? You don't. It's not detracting from your enjoyment of fishing. And you know the light gauge stuff isn't for everybody, and that's fine. You know, you've never forced it down anyone's neck. But you know, for me, guys always say to me, "Oh, don't you hate it when you snap hooks?" And we don't snap hooks. You know, I can't remember the last time I snapped the hook. And, you know, the other thing is they say we spend way too long fighting fish. And sure, I have had a few fish that have took, you know, several hours, but it wouldn't have mattered if I'd had light gauge or heavy gauge. I had as much drag as I could, you know, physically put on the angler. And the hooks were strong enough, but the angler wasn't. So it wouldn't have made any difference if we were on light gauge or heavy gauge. So it's just about knowing when to use your drag, you know, and that's actually...
Yeah. And well, the thing is, you say it there, like in the end, no one actually really cares as long as they're hooked up. I bet they're hooting, you know, like they've got a chance to catch it. So as you say, like even if it takes you a longer sometimes to catch the fish, you still catch the fish. That's the great thing about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you know, that's the other thing with light gauge is that your conversion rate of bites to hookups is so much better. Certainly for me anyway. And I'd far rather have the opportunity to lose the fish than not have the opportunity at all, you know. Because if you've got the opportunity to lose it, you've got the opportunity to catch it as well. So, yeah, I mean, I'd give it a shot. And, you know, sure, if you're fishing on the Great Barrier Reef trying to catch 1,000-pound black marlin, or up in Kona trying to catch 1,000-pound blue marlin, then, you know, of course you're not going to use light gauge. But for fishing in New Zealand, man, the stripies we catch here, I think it's absolutely perfect. And if you do happen to run over that, you know, 450 kilo blue and you hook it on your light gauge, then you've got every chance of catching it. I mean, just deal with it, you know.
Yeah. Now, when I fished at Kawhia with you this year, I took my boat down and we fished beside you. I'll just go back, like, you had a really interesting fish. Tell us about that, mate.
Oh, you're talking about that one we caught in the dark?
Yeah. Tell us about that whole story. It's pretty cool, and that's a real light gauge one right there.
Yeah. That was a real light gauge one. So, yeah, it was a glamour conditions that day, flat as, and I decided that I was going to stay out sort of at that 120 metre mark, about 30 miles offshore, right to that change of light for the inevitable evening bite. And we were seeing a lot of good bait balls. There was some guys that were staying the night out there, and we were sort of communicating, and they were seeing good bait balls and that as well. So I was doing a few loops between us and them, and they hooked up a fish, and we sort of went till I was, you know, decided that it was time to pull the gear in and go home.
I was waiting for you. I was waiting for you, Brownie.
Yeah, that's right. You were waiting for me. Yeah. So I got the boys who were on board that day to clear the gear. Everything was packed up. Boat was stationary, and I went to put the hammer down and head back towards the bar. And I noticed that my long rigger was still out, which was a Kawai in Kawai colour. So I cracked it out of the rigger while we're still stationary, wound it in, got all the way to the swivel, had a 2.5 metre bite leader, and as I went to pull the lure out of the water, there was a fish came up, missed the lure. So I got the lure, spun it around, chucked it, put the reel in free spool, chucked it, jigged it back in, had a bite, got Scooby to run up and put the boat in gear. We started running, and I 4 times he came in and grabbed the lure, dropped it, grabbed the lure, dropped it. So I dropped it back, and I knew that I could see him. He was just swiping it. He wasn't biting it. So the next time, as soon as I saw him come in, I backed the drag all the way off. I felt him bite, and we just spun the boat around right there. I put the reel in free spool, had the clicker on, had my thumb on the spool, let him go. We spun the boat around, and we chased him for about 45 minutes. Didn't jump, didn't do anything. We pulled him up on the leader, and he didn't even have a hook in his mouth. He had just looped the 90 kilo stainless wire rig over his snout, hooked back onto the wire, and he was just sitting there like that. And that was the perfect example of why you want to stay behind your fish, because he literally didn't have a hook in him anywhere.
And a light drag.
Yeah.
And light drag. Yeah, I mean, we fought him. Oh, I'd be guessing, but I would say we didn't have more than 2 kilos of drag on him for 85% of the fight. Every time he went down, I'd pump it up, and that would just turn him, and then I'd back it off, and we'd bring him up. And I guessed that he wasn't hooked very well, but I didn't realise he was not hooked at all. And that's one of... I can think of 3 fish in the last season, all big fish that we've caught that haven't had a hook on them, that have just... Yeah, some of them had the skirt wrapped around their bill. One last year, the biggest one we caught last year, he had just a hook that his bill had gone through. Well, it looked like the hook was just looped over the top of his bill and had gone tight there. And yeah, he was a big fish, and we same thing, got him in about 10 minutes, stayed behind him the whole time, drove up behind him, tagged him, grabbed his bill, let him go, and yeah, amazing. It's such an effective way to get those fish, just staying behind them like that.
Yeah, it's so cool. It not only catches the fish that are hooked, it helps you catch the fish that aren't hooked. So
yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I far prefer them to be pinned in the roof of the mouth and be jumping around like crazy. But yeah, I mean, you can't be picky, when you're trying to catch marlin. You get them any way you can.
yeah, it still counts. It still counts. So anyway, Brownie, I'm guessing your beer's getting low now, and you probably need another one. So since you've made these new episodes, where can everybody get a hold of them? Where can they watch them?
The best place to watch them at the moment is on Facebook, just on the Built to Fish TV Facebook page. I've sort of decided to do a lockdown special. I'm going to just pump out as many episodes as I can, just while we're locked down, just to say thanks to all the legends that have been supporting what we're doing for the last few years. They're on YouTube too, a few other places, but yeah, I mean, quick and easy way to find them, Built to Fish TV on Facebook, Built to Fish TV on YouTube, and yeah, there should be plenty of stuff there to keep everyone interested. There's lots of game fishing stuff, lots of marlin fishing, sword fishing, tuna fishing, so yeah, rip into it, have a look.
All right, Brownie. Well, thank you very much, mate. And go grab yourself another beer, and we'll talk to you soon, man.
Yeah, sounds good, mate. Good to chat. Thanks heaps, bro. Choo.